Hello, dear friends. I am going to give, I guess, another talk on the mishkan out of these parshiot, vayakhel, pekudei, which finished the parshiot on the mishkan in the book of Shemot, in the book of Exodus. I was also asked to give these talks before we read it in the Torah, not after, and I will try to do so if I can keep up with such. This is basically the fourth talk that I'm talking about the mishkan, and you could probably, if you've been following, you can realize that they are all interrelated. Now, I also said that the mishkan was a reaction or an answer basically to Chet Egel, and I mentioned and basically I found this idea in the Midrash Tanchuma, and I'd like to read it to you. Midrash Tanchuma is basically the basis for what Rashi writes about, that the Torah did not bring the story of the sin of the golden calf in its proper place. On the verse, Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'docham, they shall make me a sanctuary and I shall dwell in their midst. The Midrash says, when was this said to Moses? This parasha was said on Yom Kippur. And the parsha of the Mishkan, meaning the parsha Truma, which talks about building a Mishkan, that happened before the sin of the golden calf. Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Shalom, said, there is no ein mukdam muchar Torah. There is no consecutive order in the Torah. Things are sometimes moved backwards and forwards. So on Yom Kippur, it was told to Moshe, make for me a sanctuary. How do we know this? Because Moshe, of course, after the saying of the Decalogue, which was on Shavuot, on the 6th of Sivan, Moshe goes up the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. Rashi records this too. And then he comes down on the 17th of Tammuz, and he breaks the tablets. That was the sin of the golden calf. Then he goes up again for 40 days and 40 nights and comes back on the first day of Elul after asking God to forgive the Jewish people of Israel, which happens, and that's why the month of Elul is called the month of penitence, teshuvah. And then again he goes up for 40 days and 40 nights when God says to him, engrave these second tablets instead of the ones which you broke. You broke it, you fix it. And Moshe goes up then, and he brings down these new tablets 40 days later, which is on Yom Kippur. We're given. So you find that on Yom Kippur, they were totally forgiven because that's when Moses brings down the second tablets. And that's when God said to Moses, build me a sanctuary and I will be in their midst, so that all the nations shall know that the sin of the golden calf was atoned for. And that's why it's called the sanctuary of the testimony, Mishkan Ha'edut. It's a testament to all of the peoples of the world to know that the Holy One, blessed be He, dwells in this sanctuary. So it seems quite clear then from Midrash Tanchuma that the idea that the sanctuary, the Mishkan, the Ohel Moed, is basically an answer to the Chet Egel. And I just want to read the last part. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, Yavo zahav shabi mishkan, let the gold that is used in the sanctuary atone for the gold that was used in the sin of the golden calf. So again, we have this connection. How does it happen? And this is something I said last time. Just as Moses is told that he has to engrave the tablets that he broke, the people are told, you made a mistake. You thought that Moses was the go-between. You're saying that you want some type of connection. I'm giving you this connection. And the connection is not a go-between. It's a direct connection. So now that you're going to have a direct connection, you do not need mediators or any type of means in between. But if you want this direct connection, you have to build it. So the Jewish people have to build the sanctuary in the desert, and everybody's got to pitch in, just like they pitched in, unfortunately, to build the the golden calf, now they all have to pitch in to build this sanctuary, which is going to be the direct relationship between God and Israel. If they can put it together as a people under the guidance of Bezalel, who is the architect of the sanctuary, then God will dwell in their midst. And what does this mean? And actually, at the end of Pekudei, that's exactly what happens. After they finish the sanctuary, literally, which is on the first day of Nisan, the cloud covers the sanctuary of the Testament, and the glory of God fills the mishkan, the sanctuary. And Moses and the people couldn't enter because God's glory was over the sanctuary. So what happens is basically this sanctuary becomes not only a testimony, but also this possibility of an interface between the people and between God. What does that mean? If we look at the book of Shemot in general, what has happened? Shemot, of course, Nachmanides calls it the book of redemption. The Jewish people have gone into galut, into exile for the first time in Egypt. They are there for at least 210 years of slavery. Then they are saved. The shaliach, the emissary, is Moses. God takes them out. Votseiti, v'tzalti, v'galti, v'lakachti were the four expressions of freedom. And they come to Sinai to receive the Torah. But then the ultimate goal becomes not just receiving the Torah as the word of God, but the ability to interface with God, which is the mishkan, which is this tabernacle, which is this sanctuary in the desert. And in fact, now that we move to the book of Leviticus, of Vayikra is everything that's supposed to happen in this sanctuary or later on the temple. And what are these things? There's a very interesting Agadah in the Talmud, where the Talmud is talking about Bezalel, who is the architect of the Mishkan. Amar Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav. Rav is, of course, when first generation Amorah in Babylonia. Bezalel knew the secret of how to interchange and use the letters of the Hebrew language, to use the same letters through which God created the heavens and the earth. That's what Bezalel knew. I thought he knew how to work in gold and silver. Isn't that what it says in Parsha Truma and Kitisa? What does it mean that he knew the letters through which God created the heavens and the earth? It's true, God created the heavens and the earth through letters. God said, Yehi Or, which is Yud, He Yud, Aleph, Vav, Resh, and there was light. So obviously light somehow connects to the letters Yud, He Yud, Aleph, Vav, Resh. Then God said, let there be a firmament, Yehi Rakia, Yud, He Yud, Resh, Kuf, Yud, Ayin. Somehow it connects to that. That's why we call Hebrew the holy language from a mystical point of view, Kabbalistic point of view, as it says in the book of Yetzirah, but also as it says in the Midrash, that God creates the universe through the 22 letters of the Hebrew language. There's another Midrash that said God used the Torah, looked into the Torah to create the universe, but the Torah is also made up of the 22 letters of the Hebrew language. There's also a Midrash of Rabbi Akiva, which says that the letters came before God and each one wanted to be the first one through which God creates the universe. And finally, God took the bait because it was bracha and started the universe through the bait because that's the bait of Breshit. Now, without going into too much of an idea of what it means, of an explanation, what it means that God creates the universe through letters, which I always explain in my classes as information bits. But what I just want to say here is this interesting parallel, which is also brought in Midrash HaGadol, between Bezalel, who's building a tabernacle, as if for the place that God's presence will dwell, and the creation of the universe. Why do we need that parallel? Now, there's actually a dispute in the Talmud and Rosh Hashanah. Was the world created on the first of Tishrei or the first of Nisan? As you probably noticed, the tabernacle is finished on the first of Nisan. There's a certain interesting parallel going on here. Why would Bezalel need to know the secrets of the letters through which God created the universe? The question is, what exactly is the goal of the Mishkan? I want to argue that the goal of the Mishkan, as I said before, is this interface between God and man. But what does that mean? And why does it have to be a place? That's a hard question. But I'm going to try to explain it like this. The ability to walk into the Mishkan is the ability for the human being, whether as a collective or as an individual, to consciously interface with something which is above our reality. If you want, it's sort of like a nexus, a conscious nexus between our world and what we call the spiritual world, or Olam Haba, which has to be explained. But it's a conscious nexus. You don't go anywhere. You just perceive it. It's a certain awareness. This conscious nexus, when it's on a very high level, we call it prophecy. When it's on a lower level, because we say that since the time of Malachi, there is no more prophecy. But there still is Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, which I sometimes translate as divine inspiration. The ability to perceive to a certain extent, to feel, to experience the fact that there is a nexus between this world and the next. And why do we need that? Well, we need that basically to help our guidance in this world. That's why we received the Torah in the first place. You know, I always say, why do we actually have to know that God created the universe or that there's a God? Why can't we just live our lives as natural human beings? Eventually, after 120, we'll find that anyhow, right? But we need to know that there's a God because we need to know that there is significance to this life, and therefore our ethical and moral actions are important. That's why we need to know. It's like the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot in chapter 3, where Kavya ben Mahalalel says, know that everything you do will be judged. Now, this sounds, of course, like a very, let's say, depressing idea, almost like I can be judged for everything I did. But it's actually the exact opposite. It's a very happy idea. It means that everything that you do in your life, there is someone up there who cares about it, about every aspect of our lives. And if we think our lives are important, yes, because God ultimately thinks our lives are important too. So we are judged on what we're going to be doing. And therefore, if we can go through the mindset and understand that there's a higher reality, then what we will take our own lives more seriously. And then we'll try to do the things that really matter. Not the physical accomplishments, but the ability to metamorphose ourselves into something a little bit greater, a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more human, and a little bit more holy. So everything in the Mishkan, all the offerings and all the various services that happen, according to Nachmanides, these are all reminders of different things. There's an interesting interpretation of the Malbim, Meir Leibush Malbim, who tries to explain in these parshiot that the sanctuary, the Mishkan, is actually mimicking the human body. Now, this is, of course, a Kabbalistic idea that the human body is sort of a map of the higher worlds. So that there are three parts of the sanctuary. The inner part, where you have the Ark of the Covenant with the luchot, with the tablets. This is like the head. The two tablets are the two sides of the brain. And there's a curtain which separates the Holy of Holies from the oracle, from the heichal, from the holy. And that's like the separation between the head and the main part of the body by the neck. And then the second part, which has the menorah, the candelabra of light, and the showbread table and the incense altar that represents the second part of the body. And also it has a curtain, so it goes from the neck until the diaphragm. And that includes the heart, which also represents the light of wisdom, and the stomach, which is, of course, the showbread. And then the incense altar, which we smell, which represents, of course, the lungs and breathing. And then you have the third part of the mishkan, or the tabernacle and the temple, is the outer one. And again, you have that separation. As I said, it's the saref, it's the diaphragm. And then that was the place where you had the altar where the animals were sacrificed. That represents, of course, the more animal side of the human being, which is the sexual organs. So basically what happens is that you have this sort of parallel, and actually Malbim goes into great detail to show how every part of the human body can be paralleled there in the Mishkan. But this idea, of course, is continuing the Kabbalistic idea of that the human body is somehow a microcosm in a physical way of a non-physical world, which of course has to be discussed itself, what exactly that means. But the idea is that when you're walking into the Mishkan, you're entering this sort of nexus to a parallel universe, which exists anyhow. But it's somehow olamcha tireh b'chayecha. It's somehow being able to experience this otherworldliness even for a moment when you're in that Mishkan, in order to leave the Mishkan and take that with you back into your life. We try to do that during our prayer services, but we don't always succeed. That Mishkan gives you that extra push to help you feel that, in order to bring that holiness back into your life. Because as long as we're in this world, the holiness has to be drawn down into this world in order to rectify the world, in order to make it a better place, better people, more ethical, more sensitive, more holy, more spiritual. And this is the goal in the end. It's hard for us today to understand these things because we have not had a sanctuary in a temple for 2,000 years. And many people don't even understand what the point is of these things. So little by little, the more we can understand, the more we understand how not only the Jewish people need something like this, but the world at large needs something like this. And so this is sort of a culmination of the book of Exodus, of Shemot, where in the end you have the sanctuary. The Jewish people, remember, are called Mamlechet Kohanim, a nation of priests. Now, if we are a nation of priests and the world, let's say, is like a sanctuary, then that means that the nations are the ones that we are the priests for. So just like we need a sanctuary where we interface with God, the whole world needs this too. And that's why King Solomon, in the book of Kings 1, and in his tefillah, his prayer in 8, he said, Beiti beit tefillah yikareh lechol ha'amim. Of course, that's also the prophets. The prophets say that my house will be a house for all nations. But King Solomon said also, somebody come from a far land and they want to come to pray in this house. Oh God, you will hear their voice too. So basically, this is a need of mankind, but we represent this concept. And the more we understand this concept and connect to it, the world will follow suit in our footsteps. And that's why Shemot is called the book of redemption. It's a redemption both for the Jewish people and for the world, because it gives direction and significance to our lives not to run away to otherworldliness, but to know how to draw otherworldliness into our lives to make our lives more significant, more human, more sensitive, and more holy. Shalom, shalom.